Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to try and sound like this. I'm slightly too short for the lectern, so we'll see how this goes. But really pleasure to meet you all earlier. My name's Faye Taylor. I'm Head of Strategic Partnerships at the Association of Commonwealth Universities. You'll be hearing from a lot of us this morning. There's multiple partners that have been involved in putting this programme together. You'll see logos everywhere, and you'll be hearing from everyone at some point in the next day or so. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction, an overview of why we're all here, and a little bit about the ACU, because you're all from ACU member organisations, so just to sort of orientate you as to, our interest in this overall. So I'll start off with the Association of Commonwealth Universities. You have heard this morning that we have universities in every region of the Commonwealth. In fact, we have 530 university members. And our aim is to build a better world through higher education. So it's a simple mission, but a very ambitious one. And we do this through our network in all sorts of different ways. You can see the numbers on the screen there. But 10 million plus students are involved in the ACU through our networks. Just to give you a sense of the balance, we have university members, as I said, across the Commonwealth in all the regions. We have 160 members here in India. It's our biggest country, but also we have members from the Caribbean. You've met some of our colleagues this morning from the Pacific, Australasia, from Africa, and from Europe as well. When we talk about building a better world through higher education, we now use the Sustainable Development Goal framework. So I just wanted to see how familiar you were in the room with it. There's a few people nodding. Just put your hand up in the air if you've ever thought about your own research or activities in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. That's everyone almost. That's fantastic. So we ask this question quite a lot, and it's interesting how it's becoming the language and the currency of international collaboration more and more. It has its critics, and we acknowledge those, but actually, because we work across so many international borders, we really find that this is a good way of describing the excellent work that students and staff and universities and communities with their partners in civil society and with governments are doing to help tackle some of the grand challenges that we have. I think we'll be hearing quite a lot about global challenges as we go throughout the week. We've started this morning thinking about some of the social challenges in our countries, but later in the week we'll be at the British High Commission when you'll hear from three of the countries in the Commonwealth, of course, so South Africa, Rwanda and the UK, talking about their take on what the Commonwealth can do to help us tackle some of these global challenges. The interesting one for us as well is the working in partnership activity, because universities are no longer, if they ever were, ivory towers. So we work a lot with government policymakers, and we have to justify and defend sometimes the work that universities do and their students do in terms of whether a university can have impact beyond those people that pass through its gates and come to its campus and are privileged enough to do a degree. And of course, I'm sure all of you agree, given some of the examples we heard this morning already, that universities and students and staff do so much more than that, but we need to keep making the case. So one of the things we do is a lot of work with government and multilateral policymakers. So as well as working with the education and foreign affairs ministries in each of the Commonwealth countries, we work with the High Commissions, particularly those based in London, because that's where our offices are, and every Commonwealth country has a High Commission there. And we also do a lot of work at the UN. Because it's the UN, of course, that sets the Sustainable Development Goals and is the sort of coordinating unit through which countries work together. So the image you'll see here is us working with some of our sister organisations. So there is an equivalent body, university network in the francophone world called the Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie, based in Paris and Montreal, but they have, again, 800 universities in the French-speaking world, many of which are the same universities as in the Commonwealth, for example, in Canada and in Vanuatu and in French and in British-speaking parts of Africa particularly, so we have overlap in our membership. And we also work with the International Association of Universities as well, which is a UNESCO body and has another 800 or so universities. So together we're a network of 2,000 universities, and we think it's really important that higher education and research is represented, the voice of higher education and research is represented at the UN and of course at each of our individual multilateral organisation levels. So the Commonwealth, you'll be hearing later from the Commonwealth Secretariat. For those of you who are less familiar with the Commonwealth organisation, it obviously has heads of government that meet every 2 years, and this year there is the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda, in Kigali, and that will bring together foreign affairs ministers and heads of states from many of the Commonwealth countries. There are now 54 Commonwealth countries. The Maldives joined last week. It was announced 1 minute after midnight on the 1st of February, which happened to also be one day after Brexit. I'll leave that hanging in the air in terms of comms. But the announcement's been in the pipeline for a while. The Maldives used to be a member and they've rejoined recently. So there's now 54 countries, so some of our the discussions and printing might be slightly out of date. When the heads of government get together, there's really only one day when they get in a room together and they all speak about priority issues. But in the run-up to that, there are different forums. So there is a business forum, a women's forum, a people's forum, and a youth forum. And that's the one that we are particularly interested in for this session this week, because at that forum, there will be some of the heads of states, hopefully some of the foreign affairs ministers, but also senior officials from Commonwealth countries represented there to hear from youth across the Commonwealth about their priorities and to make sure that that interaction between young people who want to make a difference and policymakers is actually made. So the connection between the voice and the people who are writing the communique and the outputs from the heads of government meeting. And one of the strands this year of the youth forum is youth leadership. So the Commonwealth Secretariat have an interest in everything that you have to say today, as do we, and we want to make sure that your voice is amplified, not just in Rwanda in June, but in all of the discussions in the run-up and in the 2 years that follows in Rwanda's chair in office. So at the moment, the UK is the chair in office for the Commonwealth because London hosted in 2018, and we are still yet to find out who's going to host after Rwanda in 2022. Just a little bit about the ACU and how we work. We do all sorts of different things with our 530 members. Two of the networks that you see on the screen here are around the SDGs for peace and for climate resilience. Now, these are primarily operated through the staff in the sense that there'll be usually a senior member of the sort of university management who's a point of contact. But each of these networks involves students, academic staff, professional staff, management, thinking about universities' roles in each of these particular areas. So just to give you a flavour of it, and this obviously draws on the strengths and the expertise across the network. So the Climate Resilience Network is actually led by our universities in the small states. So in the Caribbean, we have the University of West Indies, and in the Pacific, Fiji National University and the University of the South Pacific, which covers many of the Pacific Commonwealth states. And this is a network which is about universities' role and the university community role in creating national resilience to climate. So obviously the Pacific and the Caribbean have had some horrendous impacts from climate events recently, and the universities wanted to think strategically and together across their different contexts about the sorts of roles that universities can play in helping their communities more resilient, but also thinking about really practical things about how to keep their data safe and what to do if there is a climate event and a campus is closed. How do you look after people? So it's a very practically focused network. The other, on peace and reconciliation, is an explicit acknowledgement of the fact that the Commonwealth is born from a similar colonial point in time, and that there are historical injustices that are felt across the Commonwealth. And we felt that we couldn't operate as a Commonwealth network in today's day and age if we didn't address some of those issues and how they are playing out differently in different parts of the world. So the Peace and Reconciliation Network looks at everything from how students from First Nations backgrounds are integrated into communities, to how academics and students can contribute to truth and reconciliation processes in their own countries, and all of the other activities that universities might get involved in or need to consider, like decolonisation of the curriculum, etc. So there's a lot to be said under the peace banner as well, and that's one of the networks that does that. We also do a lot with scholarships. How many of you are familiar with either any of these brands, so the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission or the Chevening Scholarship? So these are, it's a few nods here, great. So these are UK government-sponsored scholarships. We manage them at the ACU. They bring students primarily to UK universities, either physically or via distance learning, and there are something like 2,000 students per year who have scholarships attached to these. We also operate the Queen Elizabeth Commonwealth Scholarships, a little logo in the corner there. Particularly proud of that scheme. It's the smallest of all the scholarships that we run at the ACU, but it's pan-Commonwealth, so it's funded by a joint fund that Commonwealth governments have all contributed to, or 14 Commonwealth governments have contributed to, and we use the interest from that fund to fund around 30 scholarships per year in up to 20 Commonwealth countries. And we're really proud of that scheme because it's quite new and because it creates different matrix mobility across the Commonwealth. So it creates new opportunities to study subjects in countries that don't necessarily have their own scholarship schemes. So I'm just going to give you one example of a student who I met quite recently. I had the privilege of meeting a Kenyan student that had just arrived in Malaysia last year, and he's going to be studying, well, he is now studying for a master's in medical physics. Now, I didn't know what that was. I had to ask him what that was going to train him or allow him to do in his career. And it's because in this day and age, the equipment that's used in hospitals to do cancer screening trials is extremely, extremely technical and very finely balanced. So you need a master's in medical physics to recalibrate those machines every day after they've been used. And at the moment, it's not possible in Kenya to study medical physics. It's an emerging field. None of the universities there offer that course. But Malaysia has the best course in the world at the University of Malaya. So this is a Kenyan student who's gone to study so that he can go back and work in a hospital in Kenya. But he also wants to build a bridge between the University of Kenyatta and the University of Malaya so that Kenyatta can teach students itself in the future to build that course up. So it's an example of the sorts of reasons why we all need to have opportunities to go and learn in a different country, and why those opportunities are really important for national capacity building as well as the personal development that the student themselves gets to benefit from. The other thing to mention as well is that all of you, because you're all at ACU member universities, have the opportunity to access our own funding, which we have grants and mobility grants that we use. And sometimes we're lucky to work with partners like the British Council, where we can fund one-off or sort of series of initiatives like this one, which is Commonwealth Futures, which is what I want to talk to you about now. So the Commonwealth Futures series, this is the second workshop. I'm not sure how familiar you've been, and those of you on social media have probably seen that we had our first Commonwealth Futures workshop in the UK, and we have two of the delegates from sitting right at the front here who you'll meet throughout the week. So we had the first one in December, just before Christmas, a similar format, slightly bigger audience because the Commonwealth Secretariat also brought some of their youth leaders, so it wasn't all students, but the same principle, thinking about what we can learn from each other and building on the huge capacity that the Commonwealth has, all the diversity and the expertise that have been, and sort of the leaps and bounds that we can make if we all put our heads together. There's the next step at the Durban University of Technology, and again we've got a couple of students. Just remind us who you are. You introduced yourselves earlier. One. Brilliant, 3 in the third row there, who will be hosting us next in March, so it's quite a rapid series. And then, as I mentioned, there's the Chogham Youth Forum, which happens in June, and then immediately afterwards, Going Global, which is the British Council's international education activity as well, that I'm sure Tom will say a few words about. So this is a series that keeps rolling on. It hopefully won't be the end in Going Global, but this is our sort of our short to medium term priority, is making sure we hear from you all, that you all get something yourself, of course, out of the next few days, but also that we can feed that back to policymakers so that the learnings can be transmitted to many, many more students and young people across the Commonwealth. So as I said to you earlier, it's amazing that you're all here. There was a huge interest. When we opened applications for this, we asked each of our member universities to nominate a student, and nominate a student that had demonstrated real engagement with the community and exceptional youth leadership. So you've all been through a fairly rigorous process. Amy actually was involved with many others on the selection panel and read all of these incredible applications that we received earlier last year. And so, as I said to you before, one of the resources that you have available to you, as well as the incredible program that OP Jindal Global University have put together for us over the next few days, is each other. So we really want you to make the most of the fact that you can learn from each other, and we hope that when you go home as well, you'll have new friends, new colleagues, people that you can call on if you are trying to implement something in your own institution or in your own community, peers that you can draw on, a long time to come from now in your careers. So the particular title for this stop here at OP Global Jindal University is Commonwealth Futures, Inspiring Global Citizens. Each of them has a slightly different take on what what the university itself and its academics wants to contribute. But the overarching theme for the whole Commonwealth Future Series is about social cohesion and student leadership for social cohesion. And in particular, we think that respect, tolerance and understanding are really important elements of that, because whatever the issue is, we have broad issues that we heard this morning, from sexual and gender-based violence or LGBT rights in one place to over-politicization of students or communities in another, or misinformation. So one of the things that's going to become common across all of that is an ability to have an open, respectful and trusting conversation between not just us, but between us and our communities. There's 60% of the Commonwealth population is under 30, so young people are going to be defining the future of the Commonwealth and their roles as citizens within it. And so your generation, as we see it, is the Commonwealth's greatest asset. So we feel that we have a role in at least creating forums like this for you to meet each other and think about your role as leaders in the future. Just a tiny bit about group work. We will go into a session later. You've seen already that we've split you into groups, which we hope are as diverse as possible in all forms. But what we're going to be asking you to look at over the next few days and be thinking about before your presentations, which are going to be on the final day, is civil initiatives for peace. Thinking of some ideas about what that might look like for you, or what you might want to work together on. And then with that basis, thinking about the recommendations that you might want to take to global leaders at CHOGM and at Going Global. We've got 4 days. There are formal sessions today on the first day and on the last day, where you'll be given particular time in the programme to work with your groups on the challenge, and we'll spend longer talking about what that challenge is later. But we do want you to make the most of the time that you have tomorrow and on Tuesday, when we'll be moving around a bit as well on Tuesday, with your groups, thinking about some of these activities, just so that we can make the most of the last day, because you'll be asked to present to each other and to a small panel. And we also are very keen to support you creating any digital content that you might want to create. So we have people on hand from OP Jindal and from ACU who can help advise on how to create digital content. Most of you will be better than us anyway, so just to let you know that there is some support if you need it. But this is the sort of thing that we can then share with our networks, and as I said, make this a much bigger initiative than the 30 people that were able to make it to India this time. And that's the final thing. We want this to be fun. We want it obviously to be a learning experience. We want to learn from you too. But there's an incredible program coming up with all sorts of opportunities to meet new people and see some of the local area as well. We're going to be getting into Delhi as well on Tuesday. So do have a really, really good time. And we'll be really looking forward to getting to know you better over the next few days. Well done. Hand over to Tom.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Oh, that's very loud. Scared myself. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. Firstly, I imagine for a lot of you, this may well be your first time to India. Is that right? Yeah. So, big welcome to India, to Sonipat, where you are at the moment, just outside of Delhi, and to OP Jindal University, which is one of the really best places of learning in India. So, it's a university that really prides itself on being a place where kind of global ideas can come together. So it seems a very fitting place for so many representatives from all over the world. I didn't realize quite how many countries would be represented here today, can be together. So it's absolutely kind of perfect place for us to be. I'm from the British Council, who have been kind of partners in this scheme with the Association of Commonwealth Universities. And one of the kind of sub-texts of Commonwealth Futures is the Gandhi Series, which is which is part of the answer of why these workshops are happening in the UK, in South Africa, and also here in India. And just this morning I was kind of reflecting on that myself, because I'm a Londoner. I studied at the University College London, where Gandhi, a few years before me, studied himself. I then I took classes in a place called Tavistock Square, and it's lots of kind of small houses, really, where with these big windows, and I'd sit in the seminars looking out on the window, and just outside the window is a statue of Gandhi. Until 3 years ago, I also lived in South Africa. So my partner is from Durban, where Gandhi spent many years of his life, and obviously now here I'm in Delhi. And the amazing thing about living in India is you get to learn every single day, and in a country that has been so shaped by Gandhi's ideas, the principles he lived by, how it shaped this country's politics, its society, and its outlook on the world. And I'm presuming most of you arrived yesterday. What may have passed you by, I suspect not those of you from India itself, but there was an election here yesterday. There was the Delhi legislative assembly elections yesterday. So your timing is pretty perfect, right? If you are, during your next 4 days, you're going to be looking at these issues of kind of leadership, but also participatory democracy too. And what in practice, what that looked like yesterday was Delhi kind of emptied itself out. It sort of felt like. So whether it's schools or fire stations or community centres were repurposed as places for people to vote, for polling stations. And my colleague, who I came here with this morning, he voted yesterday, and he stood in line for 2.5 hours to cast his vote. And that's because it matters to people. It is a responsibility that is taken very seriously by people in the city because of what their belief in what their government can do for them, and on the big agendas like education. And so the parties that campaigned had in their manifestos a whole series of things which I imagine will be very familiar to our own countries that we're from. So manifestos that covered workers' rights, jobs, infrastructure, education, access to water, and anti-corruption. And over the course of, by the time your 4 days are finished, I think on Tuesday specifically, the results of that election will happen. But in these 3 countries where the workshops will be happening or have happened already, 2019, that's just left us, was also a year when each of those countries had national general elections. And so they've had their major moments of participatory democracy very recently. But what we know is that democracy is a kind of daily endeavour. It's not restricted solely to once every 5 years when you go to your polling station. And perhaps you as students and you as student leaders know that better than almost anybody, because with your campus politics and what you practice and see and cultivate is an environment where action is possible, where you can influence kind of national policy, you can shape national conversations too, and are often very far ahead of the national agenda. And I've seen that in my time in the UK, in my time in South Africa, when there were big issues around fees, for example, and then very recently here in India too. And so your role is really fundamental in, advancing very core social issues, and finding ways to kind of advance our thinking and our societies towards the kind of value systems that we want to be demonstrating. And so international programs like Commonwealth Futures are really important mechanisms for that to be possible, because they are about these, really important principles that I think we all learn during our time in higher education, which is around, connection, around collaborating, and around finding ways of kind of sharing our ambitions. And that's all about stepping into other people's realities, ways to kind of discover new ideas, and then recognizing the things that unify us. And that's what the work of my organisation, the British Council, aspires to do. We try every day, we don't always manage it. But our job is to find ways that help young people to connect, create and collaborate together. And you are all examples of that in action. One thing I want to say about kind of higher education more generally is, and it links to what I was saying about the elections, is that it's a really prominent issue in people's lives, as we all know, and India is no exception. So, when you come to India, what will often be kind of thrown at you is the sheer scale of the place. So, a country that has 1.3 billion people, that's almost impossible to fathom what that means. But it's got really, really high ambitions for where it will be, where it is already, but where it will be in the future. And education, higher education, is an absolutely core part of that. So at the moment there are about 36 million university students in the country, but there's a new national education policy that's just being finalised right now that says within, I think, 15 years, they want that number to be doubled. So there's a real challenge or ambition for the kind of massification of the education system here. But simultaneously, what's really important is that it's a quality education for people. These are all things that link to the Sustainable Development Goals too, right? And that education provides people with the skills that they need for the rest of their lives. And it's clearly stated within that policy that with a flourishing higher education system is the only way national development objectives can be met. That it is the primary route for social mobility in this country, just like it is in pretty much all countries around the world. And as Faye mentioned, one of the big things that we do is Going Global, which is an annual conference for higher education leaders around the world. It's the biggest gathering of international education leaders anywhere in the world. So when your time comes, when you're going to be presenting there, you are going to be sitting right in front of the people that shape how universities deliver education, how they imagine education and its role for the world. So the ideas that you build over this next week in the future workshops as well will be ideas that all these people need to hear, that they'll want to hear as well. So, that's, I think, something you're going to have really fantastic opportunities to be sitting in front of people who can they pull the levers of change in their institutions, whether that's in their governments or in their universities. What is it else I want to say? One of the other things around that kind of the international aspect of this, but also of higher education, is that what it builds in people and your kind of how it shifts our horizons just by participating. So I'm a international student myself, and I know that it's this thing that studying in another country really shaped the decisions I took for myself subsequently. And what the primary reason for that happening is because you put yourself into another culture, a kind of unfamiliar place, and it forces you to learn huge things about yourself. And also it just naturally is going to change your horizons, the perspectives you take on issues that really matter to you, because you'll have people from all over the world influencing those things. That's why we focus on that in our education work as well at the British Council. So here in India we have something called UKIERI, which is a research collaboration program between the UK and India. And we're just launching in the summer something called Study in India, which will see 100 UK undergraduates, maybe even more, coming to this university. And there'll be another 500 going to other universities around the country. And that is around young people getting that global outlook for themselves that we know will absolutely serve them well in the future, because it's when you have those kind of skills, those kind of attitudes to see the world differently, to create new networks for yourself, that the kind of possibility for change feels more possible, I think. And so, those approaches that are born out of that kind of idea will be the things that will be required for the world in the future. So the kind of collective action that's going to be needed for things like the climate emergency require lots of negotiation. It requires overcoming some, really major obstacles that are holding change back. And I think the starting point of when that will be possible to undo those things will be when more of the kind of attitudes and mindsets that are born from the principles of programs like this happen. So I just really hope you have an amazing 4 days together, that you make these new networks for yourself, and that you take that energy and all those ideas into the forums that are coming your way in the future. And I just wish you every bit of luck. Hope it goes well.
Hi everyone, good morning. Apologies for showing up fashionably late. My flight actually landed this morning after an 8-hour delay. So if you find me wandering half asleep through the grounds, just kind of nudge me back to where I'm supposed to be, which I feel like is going to be a common theme this morning for me. So apologies for that. It's really good to see you all here. You all look a lot fresher than I feel. So I'm Amy. I am from the Commonwealth Secretariat. I work specifically in the Countering Violent Extremism unit at the Commonwealth Secretariat. Now, tomorrow you all have the pleasure of a whole hour with me, and I can explain more about exactly kind of what we do and our kind of history and everything like that, and kind of really talk to you guys. I really want to get your thoughts and chat with you, and it's going to be quite an informal session. It's just before dinner, but we can do it. So today I just wanted to introduce myself. I'll be here all week to give you a brief kind of brief description, brief explanation. So the CVE unit, we're within the Secretariat, but we're quite independent. We started out, we kind of concepted in 2015, and we started operation in 2017. So we're relatively new. The idea being that, it's violent extremism is something that affects everyone globally. It's a real global threat, global phenomenon. And actually the Commonwealth Secretariat itself is kind of uniquely placed to combat that threat, being that we have a kind of very transnational element to us. And, violent extremism is very insidious, it is fast moving, and it transcends global boundaries, and so we have to as well. And that's why events like this, are so important. We're utilising these networks, and we are kind of coming together and fostering those partnerships that are so important for things like this. And it's a real honour to be here, and I thank OP Jindal University for hosting us all, and I think it's really, really important. So to save me from waffling, I'm just going to kind of give you guys a bit of a brief breakdown. So we don't often work in India. We have kind of some core countries that we focus on, which are Trinidad and Tobago, Cameroon, Tanzania, and Bangladesh. But I've been to India before. I had the pleasure of coming last year as well to look at counter-terrorism and counter-violent extremism initiatives. So we are looking to expand that activity in India. We're looking to kind of work across the Commonwealth as well. Now, what is preventing countering violent extremism? I know you're dying to know. I will shorten it to PCVE, otherwise we'll be here all day. And the idea is it's kind of, instead of the kind of hard side of counterterrorism, which is, the kind of military aspect, that kind of, that hard side of it, PVE or CVE is the soft side of countering terrorism, the kind of how do we mitigate the factors that might lead somebody to become a violent extremism? How do we change people's hearts and minds to a culture of non-violence, to looking at why people might feel that way and why they might become violent extremists? And that's something that I look forward to discussing within the context of kind of Gandhian philosophy of non-violence, because he kind of really advocated for that idea of looking at, why we have to look at the root causes of things like that, and really kind of help promote that non-violence and talking to one another and building that network. So that's something that at the CV unit, that's what we try and do. We try and look at why in a really context-specific manner. So we like to work with local people, we like to go into countries, and we like to kind of say, what do you think you need, rather than parachuting in and telling people what they need. So we have done some work in India, like I said. We did a youth dialogue in April last year, and I think it's really important that young people are involved in initiatives like this every step of the way, and it's something that, when I joined the CV unit, I is really important to me. I think young people are integral, especially, young people from across the world that are coming together in kind of espousing these ideas of violent extremism, but also looking to the future. You are the future. Maybe I'm with you guys too. We are the future. And I think it's so important that you guys, your voices are heard. And that brings me on to CHOGM. So just briefly how it's kind of relevant to us. So within, kind of what the values of the last CHOGM meeting and those being reiterated, an actual key element of that is, deepening the commitment to democracy and human rights and rule of law, but specifically within CHOGM there will be a discussion on renewing the specific commitment to preventing and countering violent extremism across the Commonwealth. So that's kind of where we come in on that side of things, and I think, as I said, it's so important that all your views are integrated into discussions at CHOGM, and that's something that I'll be taking away from this session, from this workshop. As I said, I'll be here all week as well. So there will be a specific emphasis on PCV at CHOGM, or a discussion around it, and I want to know what you guys think. I'm here to listen to you, I'm here to work with you. I'm going to be here all week. You're so lucky. And, and I think it's really, really important that your voices are heard in CHOGM, and that's kind of why I'm here as well, kind of building on the great work that ACU are doing too. So to wrap that up, that is kind of my role to play here. I'm really looking forward to having discussions with you all and helping to facilitate and listening to what you have to say. And again, just don't let me nap again today. I need to just power through and I'll be fine. So, thank you.
Thank you both. So just before we hand over to the inaugural ceremony, I'm glad that you've managed to meet representatives from the ACU, British Council and Commonwealth Secretariat. As I said, we're 3 of the 4 partners who've really invested in making this happen. And just before, in case, it's nice to say the thank yous at the beginning, I think. So I just wanted to particularly say a huge thank you to OP Jindal Global University, who are hosting us so generously this week. We had an extraordinary response right from the top. So thanks to the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Raj Kumar, right from the start, who not only gave his sort of warmest welcome to all of us to host, to be having this event here, but also introduced us to some of his extraordinary colleagues. I don't know how many are in the room right now, but thank you so much to Masumi, Nandita, to Hina, and to Abhinav. I'm sure you know just how much work goes into something like this. There are 15 countries represented, almost 30 students. So it's incredible that we've managed to get so many people here, but it is in no small part thanks to our amazing colleagues at OP Jindal. I also wanted to mention the Registrar, Professor YSR Murthy, as well. I don't know if he's in the room yet. Thank you. So from now on in, we'll mostly be in the hands of our colleagues from OP Jindal Global University who've put together most of the programme. As I said, we'll be coming back together as a group in our groups later today and on the last day, but all of the invitations and the organising and logistics for the next few days and the intellectual input that's gone into thinking about the workshops has mostly come from Jindal. So thank you so much. And we're just really looking forward to the next few days and to hearing from you. So thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Nandita Kaushal, and on behalf of International Institute for Higher Education, Research and Capacity Building, OP Jindal Global University, I extend a warm welcome to all to the second in the Commonwealth Future Workshop Series on Inspiring Global Citizens, the Gandhi Series workshop, organized at JGU in collaboration with Association of Commonwealth Universities, British Council, UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Development, and Participatory Research in Asia, Priya International Academy. This event forms part of the 3-part Commonwealth Future Series. The first workshop took place in London, UK. The second is being held at JGO in India, and the third will take place in Durban, South Africa. This workshop comes at a very important time when the world is undergoing a profound change. As Nobel Laureate for Peace and spiritual leader Dalai Lama once said, and I quote him, "We have big war going on today between world peace and world war, between the force of mind and the force of materialism, between democracy and totalitarianism," unquote. It is indeed in this context that the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, his principles of peace, ahimsa, and nonviolence, his emphasis on truth, kindness, simplicity, spirituality, and fearlessness acquire a special significance. Gandhian philosophy has not only transcended boundaries of race, religion, and physical boundaries, but also transcended presence of time and generations. This 4-day conference is therefore designed to provide a platform for student leaders from across the Commonwealth countries to explore these ideas relating to Gandhian principles and highlight the role of young leaders in promoting social cohesion through cultures of tolerance, ethics, respect, peace, and understanding. As we all come today for this workshop on Commonwealth futures, I can't help but resonate with what Gandhi once said. The future depends on what you do today. Hence, I urge you to think about what you can do now so that you can develop a better and sustainable future tomorrow. And on this note, I would request Professor Dr. Vayasa Murthy, Registrar, OP Jindal Global University, and Senior Fellow, International Institute for Higher Education, Research and Capacity Building, to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning. I once again want to extend a warm welcome to each one of you who have traveled from different countries and who are present here for this workshop. Our university was established in the year 2009. We started with one school, that was law school, 10 faculty members and 100 students. Today, there are 8 schools dealing with law, business, international affairs, public policy, liberal arts, journalism, banking, and architecture. There are over 5,000 students. It's an 83-acre campus, and Global is our middle name, and we have 250 international collaborations with some of the best institutions across the world, and have been implementing various forms of collaboration, including student exchanges, faculty exchanges, joint conferences, joint research programs. And we are proud of the diversity within our student community and our faculty. Over nearly 50% of our students are females, and even among the faculty, the gender diversity is quite impressive, and they also hold positions as assistant, associate, or vice dean or deans. In a short span of time, we have covered a lot of ground, and last year, our university entered the World University Rankings as the youngest university in the world to enter the QS rankings, and was in the 750 to 800 bracket. And there is yet another category of rankings, that is those which are less than 50 years old. And there we entered in the top 150 universities in the world. And there are only 3 from India which figure in the Young Universities ranking. And we have also been given autonomy, one of the select institutions within the country to be given autonomy, and recently recognized by the Government of India as an institution of eminence. So welcome, and Professor Rajkumar, I believe, is meeting you tomorrow. He developed the vision of a multidisciplinary global university, and then persuaded our Chancellor to give a one-time philanthropic grant on 3 conditions, that he commits a substantial financial resources, and that too in a non-profit manner, and with total academic freedom and autonomy, and that's how we started. And so we are so delighted to host all of you at our campus for this special Gandhi Series workshop, and welcome, and I hope you had a pleasant flight. And On this theme, I just want to share a few of my thoughts. Gandhi had been a profound thinker, and he inspired generations of people across the world. And I just want to, today when we see the contemporary challenges which Nandita mentioned in her initial remarks, there is xenophobia, there is intolerance against migrants, and many other forms. India itself had a caste system which was practiced for centuries, and today millions suffer from discrimination and face human rights violations. And Gandhi always, in a very simplistic but profound way, put a mirror to ourselves. I want to quote one of his profound sayings. He said, "It has always been a mystery to me how men can feel honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings." Despite efforts by the international community, despite efforts by the civil society, despite efforts by the governments, discrimination persists, and discrimination affects many of us in multiple ways across the world. And there's a lot more that all of us need to do in order to address this discrimination and the related human rights violations. These contemporary challenges, again referred by my young friend Nandita, also make me draw reference to the 7 deadly sins which Gandhiji said. And I quote, he talked about 7 deadly sins. Wealth without work. You can relate many of our contemporary challenges to some of these sins which Gandhiji flagged. Pleasure without conscience. Knowledge without character. Today, many educational institutions are producing graduates, but what kind of, do they have value systems? Are they giving back to the society? And that makes this knowledge without character a very terrible sin and terrible serious issue. Commerce without morality. Science without humanity. Today, deadly weapons of mass destruction are being produced, and how science ought to be tempered with humanity. Religion without sacrifice, and last but not least, politics without principles. We see many examples of politics without principles across the world. I used to work in the Government of India as a part of the civil service before I moved into academics. And the Indian administrators are repeatedly told that there is a talisman given by Gandhi, and whenever you are in doubt, remember this talisman. These are is a profound statement. He said, "I will give you a talisman. Whenever you are in doubt, or when the self becomes too much with you, apply the following test. Recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man whom you may have seen, and ask yourself, if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him, will he gain anything by it? Will it restore him to control over his own life and destiny? In other words, will it lead to Swaraj or freedom for the hungry and spirituality starving millions?" He says, once if the answer is in the affirmative, then you will find your doubts and yourself melting away. So what happens when the administrators generally carry on their duties? In the hustle and bustle of work, they often tend to ignore, and normally the laws, policies, practices are not underpinned by human rights principles, underpinned by these things. And that's why you need to imagine the face of the poorest and the weakest man and see whether the proposed step, will that deliver that person from his current misery or not. And it's a very powerful test which Gandhi has given us. He given us many other things. I'll just refer to a couple of other things. Today when we see conflict and its disproportionate impact on women, children, population displacements, refugee flows across national borders, and this is both interstate and intrastate. There's an endemic conflict in many countries out of poverty and out of ethnic nationalism and many other ills. Gandhiji said, peace will not come out of a clash of arms, but justice lived and done. See the connection between peace and justice. In fact, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right in the preamble, the links between peace on the one hand, freedom and justice have been captured by the UDHR as well. And Gandhiji also talked about trusteeship, how corporates, that the trusteeship idea which Gandhiji now propounded has a great relevance for the sustainable development. Today, where there's a climate crisis, today the climate change and climate crisis issues are threatening the very existence of many island nations and across the world. And how Gandhi mentioned, that we have enough in the nature for what each one of us want, but not for filling our greed. So he talked about the trusteeship and how the corporates need to keep the trusteeship, that you are a trustee for the wealth that you possess, and you should use it for the social benefit. There's yet another quotation which we normally refer to in our regular this thing: be the change you want to see in the world. Like, in other words, lead by your own personal example. You want good things to happen, and you start it with yourself. So Gandhiji manifested himself, and this non-violence is not an easy thing. It's a very, very high, exalted thing in the face of, he took on the colonial mighty British Empire, and with this unique and powerful tool of non-violence, and could shake the British Empire. The strategies which he adopted and the kind of unique struggle that he adopted was able to dislodge the colonial rulers from this thing and get independence for the country. And in one of the he led a salt satyagraha from Dandi March, it's called. Like, he took a group of dedicated villagers, and then the British forces took him on, and then this account was, graphically captured by an American journalist, and where he said, as the security forces rained their sticks on the heads of the satyagrahis, one row fell down, and the other row took their place, and he talks about, in a very graphic way, the numbness of the situation, and then the fearless courage with which these people who were totally convinced of what they are doing, and after a while, he says, this mindless violence has shaken the conscience of everyone around, and that they could do this to the fellow human beings. See, normally when somebody hits you, your instinctive reaction, even if it be let's say, mosquito bite, is to kill the mosquito, or but here, imagine row after row of satyagrahis being beaten by wooden stick on their skulls, and yet they are offering no resistance, and that is a such a powerful tool. So Gandhiji could do lots of things, and his life, his message, his teachings have an eternal relevance. And I'm so glad all of you are here and attending this wonderful workshop. And I once again wish you welcome to our country and wish you have a great workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind address, sir. That was really inspiring. I would now request Dr. Moshmi Mukherjee, Deputy Director and Associate Professor, International Institute for Higher Education, Research and Capacity Building, to kindly deliver the inaugural address.
Thank you, Nandita, and welcome all of you once again. I have already met you during the icebreaker session, but I just wanted to share a little bit of whatever I have to say with a personal note here. I'm really very thankful to our Vice Chancellor and also our Registrar, Professor Murthy, for engaging me in this project, because it's kind of really very personal for me, in the sense Gandhi is not a name from history book for me, a name that I learned as a child from my own grandfather, who was himself a Gandhian freedom fighter from Calcutta. So I would like to pay respect, begin what I have to say by paying respect to my own grandfather. Thank you all. Now, the theme of this conference is Commonwealth Futures Inspiring Global Citizens. But what does it mean to be a global citizen? Here at this university, I teach a course on global citizenship and international understanding. And through this course, the students read a lot of literature, academic literature on global citizenship, and in the context of sustainable development goals, and deliberate on what does it mean to be a global citizen. Does global citizen negate national citizenship and local community engagement? This is the biggest question that is in the minds of everybody who comes to the class at the beginning of the semester. And towards the end of the semester, they slowly realize that, oh, it's not so. Global citizenship does not mean negating the local or the immediate community, okay? We are literally opening up the boundaries. Citizenship entails rights and duties, but in the context of sustainable development goals, we are opening up the boundaries within which we operate and talk about rights and duties. We need, because each and every local problem in the 21st century is a global problem. Just think about the coronavirus situation. We now have coronavirus cases even in India, in many other parts of the world. And of course, climate change and issue of violent extremism, it's a global problem, something that Commonwealth CV unit is addressing. So we have to think about our rights and duties as citizens beyond those local small little boundaries. Therefore, I think Gandhian philosophy of ahimsa, non-violence, satyagraha, truth, and sarvodaya, welfare for all, influenced by his readings of both Eastern and Western philosophy, is extremely relevant when we talk about global citizenship. Although Gandhi did not especially discuss ecological sustainability, his ideas have inspired several ecological movements in India and elsewhere in the world. To Gandhi, education meant developing an ethic of responsibility and ecological awareness for sustainability and greater appreciation of all living organisms. I would also state here that though Gandhi led the Swaraj Movement, or the movement for self-rule in India during British era, Gandhi was a good example of global citizen. His philosophy and methods were shaped by his own study of law in England, his practice of law in South Africa, and his method of satyagraha, non-violent resistance, developing out of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. He believed that through educational and cultural exchange, we can help usher a more just, peaceful, and sustainable future for all. On 16th of November 1947, the year before his assassination, Gandhi wrote in a newspaper called Harijan, which he himself started, and I'm quoting here from Gandhi from Harijan. I'm deeply interested in the efforts of the United Nations Economic, Social, and Cultural Organization to secure peace through educational and cultural activities. I fully appreciate that real security and lasting peace cannot be secured so long as extreme inequalities in education and culture exist, as they do among the nations of the world. He had an inclusivist vision of the world, which he saw as being composed of many cultures, all interrelated by common moral principles, and each with its profound contribution. Embedded on the wall of his Sabarmati ashram in Gujarat, there is a famous quote, if you ever get to visit there. And it says, I quote here again, "I do not want my house to be walled on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the cultures of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, but I refuse to be blown off my feet by any." So he believed that one has to be rooted in one's own culture to understand the other. Professor Ramin Jahanbeglu, whom you will also meet and hear, he'll be here on 12th delivering the valedictory address. He's the director of our JGU Mahatma Gandhi Center for Peace Studies. He wrote in an article on Cosmopolitan, Citizenship, and Nonviolence, and here I'm quoting from Jahanbeglu, "Gandhi's intercultural approach to the ideas of civilization and citizenship is a form of cosmopolitanism that refrains from monolithic moralizing and gestures instead towards a comfort with difference, alterity, and otherness." However, his intercultural approach and cosmopolitan ideals were not in conflict with a deep sense of local social responsibility and community engagement, as I mentioned. Gandhi sought to improve the conditions for lower castes and outcasts and untouchables, as Professor Murthy also mentioned, within the local Indian context, and he believed that this can be achieved only through education. On 23rd of February 1934, once again I'm quoting from Gandhi's newspaper Harijan, Gandhi wrote that the untouchables should be taught to assert their right of elementary citizenship. He actually used the word citizenship here. He was very much aware that the marginalized groups not only have less rights, they have many more duties that are not accompanied by rights. Gandhi's educational theories were shaped by a firm belief in God, the dignity of human life, and dignity of labor, which emphasized learning by doing as well as nonviolence. And we have designed these thematic workshops for all of you through this course of 4 days, thinking in mind Gandhian philosophy of education, which really emphasizes local community engagement and development, peace and nonviolence to counter violent extremism, and for a much more just and sustainable world. With this, I would once again welcome and felicitate all of you here for being with us at Open Jindal Global University, and we hope that through the proceedings of this 4 days, all of you would become a global citizen just like Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you. Okay. Nandita is requesting me to introduce our keynote speaker for this 4-day conference. Let me introduce you to another global citizen whom I know personally, I guess, and I hope Dean Sudarshan would not disagree. Dean Sudarshan is the Dean of our Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. He has himself studied and lived in many parts of the world throughout his life. He has worked with many international development organizations like Ford Foundation, UNDP, and has had an excellent career throughout, actually working on policy at the global level and also doing policy advocacy at the local level. Currently, he's the Dean of, as I mentioned, Professor and Dean of our Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. Dean Sudarshan, please welcome to you to deliver the keynote address at this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be asked to be here on this occasion. I think this, we must say that this is, first of all, we must celebrate the Commonwealth. Gandhi did. India and the former colonies of the British Empire would not be in an association called the Commonwealth, but for his stance vis-a-vis the nationalist leaders in the country at that time. And in a very telling way, it was presaged in the conflicts that he had in South Africa with General Smuts, who was then the Prime Minister. He was later Field Marshal. And so he was his main antagonist. Gandhi in South Africa was there. He went as a lawyer to represent a businessman in his interests, and he got involved with the Indian community. Now, more recently, in South Africa, as well as in African countries, people have begun to ask, was this man, who's so made so much of a saint by the world, wasn't he also racist, right? Now, we need to understand that, people are not born as saints. His main purpose was to be an advocate for the Indian community. And he did not know very much, actually, about the history of the black people of South Africa. So everything that he said was from a political stance of asking for equality for the Indian community. And of course, in the apartheid regime, you had, the distinctions between coloreds, blacks, whites, all of that. So it's true that he did make comments where he made the case that India was a great civilization and the people who came from there shouldn't be treated in the manner in which they were. But implicit in that, of course, was a lack of sympathy and understanding at that time of the predicament and the greater humiliation that had been heaped upon the blacks. So I think he grew, he evolved, and that's promising because it holds out some hope that even though Immanuel Kant once described all of humanity. He said, out of this crooked timber of humanity, nothing straight can ever be made. But Gandhi was one of those persons who may have begun as a crooked timber, but certainly, straightened a lot of things. If not, many others around him. And so one of the poignant things that I find about this is that, I went to Johannesburg, where, firstly, let me say that, since this event is South Africa and India and in the United Kingdom, the South Africans withdrew from the Commonwealth in 1961. They declared themselves a republic. The apartheid regime did. And it was only in April of 94 that at the invitation of the other members of the Commonwealth, that South Africa returned to the Commonwealth. When I went to Johannesburg, the Constitutional Court is on a hill. It's called Constitution Hill. The court symbolically is built with bricks taken down from a notorious prison known as Jail Number 4. And it's a beautifully designed constitutional court, because it's like the justice under the tree idea of Africa. It's transparent. Anyone walking around can look in and watch the proceedings in the court through glass windows. And in Jail Number 4, there is a museum for Gandhi, because he was imprisoned there because he began a campaign to burn passes that Indians were obliged to carry. Anyone coming into a white territory was obliged to carry an identity card. And he did a bonfire of these passes, and this was a criminal act, and he was jailed for that. But he was called a political prisoner, and then that's when he realized that, there was, even within prison, a hierarchy in terms of someone called a political prisoner given better rations and an extra blanket maybe, and the others not. So he was, this is part of his evolution, as to then understanding that why are my fellow black prisoners treated in this way, and because I'm labeled a political prisoner, I'm treated differently. And in prison, he made a pair of sandals, and he sent it to General Smuts, as a gift. Now, what was interesting was that when Gandhi returned from South Africa to India, there was a package for him in the cabin of his ship, and in that was a package from General Smuts. And that package contained this pair of sandals that Gandhi had sent to Mr. General Smuts. He was returning it to Gandhi, but with a note which says, "I have worn these sandals for many a summer, even though I may feel I am not worthy to stand in the shoes of so great a man. It was my fate to be the antagonist of a man for whom, even then, I had the highest respect." Now, this is remarkable. I mean, not many individuals will be able to have this political antagonism and yet a bond of affection and mutual respect. So, and with respect to Britain, there were many strands in the Indian nationalist movement vociferously opposed to British rule. But Gandhi was, in a way, an admirer of British liberal values. And in fact, when for a brief period between 1947, 15th of August, when India got its independence, and the adoption of the Indian Constitution, you had Mountbatten as the viceroy for a period of time. So in a sense, in that period of time, constitutional lawyers could argue about this. India was a dominion. And Gandhi wrote and said, why India is a dominion until it becomes fully independent after its constitution, so why not have the Union Jack on its flag? Now, this, of course, the other nationalists were quite dismayed. What is this man talking about? But so I think the fact that when the young Princess Elizabeth got married, before she became queen, Gandhi sent her a gift, which was a tablecloth woven out of the yarn that he had spun in his spinning wheel, right? So you see, the thing is that far ahead, Gandhi was able to overcome these antagonisms of enmity between peoples, and had this capacity to envisage what is now the Commonwealth. And I think it's a kind of it's an institution that's not many people pay as much attention to it as they ought to. You see everything else is crumbling around. Look at what the state of the South Asian Association in our part of the world. The SAARC is virtually dead. The ASEAN in Southeast Asia is riven with difficulties and so on. We've not been able to form a human rights commission for Asia as a whole. And sadly, the European Union is no longer what it was, with Britain having pulled out of it. And you have a situation in the world where, President Trump declares that an internationalist vision is not needed, that each leader should look to its own people, and never mind if it means impoverishing or hurting other nations, each one should behave as if their nation should come first. Now, this is the context in which we are all concerned about how to envision a future. Now, there is a sort of a saying that the future is not what it used to be. And it's true in a way because of the phenomenal uncertainties that lie ahead. What's with technology? What will happen with artificial intelligence, with robots? Will we have conventional jobs? Would the world look like the way it is now? It's very, very difficult to anticipate. We are educating people in universities. Is this knowledge and education going to be relevant at all? When many things that involve, skills can be made by robots. So we are in a situation where we have to consider what is it that is enduring about humanity. And in that sense, I think this is a great idea that the Association of Commonwealth Universities hit upon to try and think through what the world needs at this point in time when we face so much uncertainty. And one of the things has been when you say the future is not what it used to be, there's a sort of a general assumption that, there is progress and the world will become a better place, and there are, knowledge is cumulative. We stand on the shoulders of those who went before us and can look ahead. All of these optimistic notions have been challenged. We seem to be regressing in a number of areas. Democracy itself is something that is causing a lot of anxiety and anger. People don't think their representatives elected to represent them in parliaments actually represent in the people's interests. There seems to be the belief, and by and large borne out with a lot of evidence, that representatives look after their own interests and neglect the duty they were charged with, which is to act in the common interest or the national interest. So we are in that kind of a situation, and therefore we need to kind of rediscover some durable values. The other, of course, is we somehow assume that with the suffrage movement and with India giving adult franchise and the vote to everyone, women especially, many countries didn't. India took a very bold step in declaring universal adult franchise. We have we have to worry about that and about people with different sexual orientations and their discrimination. In all of these respects, there's something or the other in this extraordinary man, Gandhi. I mean, he was exasperating to many people. He called his autobiography My Experiments with Truth. And some of his experiments were really bizarre, but he took them seriously. And I'd say that any of us who are interested in law and jurisprudence should understand that Gandhi hit upon an idea as a lawyer, which is that in a courtroom you're looking for what you might call microscopic truth. I mean, did A hit B? and violate the criminal law. What is the evidence for this? This is a kind of, microscopic examination. And there's a kind of truth, of course, but you are trying to reach it. Gandhi himself advanced an understanding of truth which you might call an experiential truth. That is, only by living it through, living the experience, do you know something, and which is to be taken to be the truth because you know it. And this really means that anyone else experientially experiencing something else, or, related to the same thing, may regard the truth as something else. And he also, in a way, envisaged or presaged what happened in South Africa among many of Gandhi's admirers, Martin Luther King, Albert Einstein, was Nelson Mandela. And one of the things that comes out is you might call what is a form of truth, which is a dialogic truth, a truth that emerges when you engage in a genuine dialogue, which is what the Truth and Reconciliation Committee of South Africa did. When people re-examine what they did, what actions they did, it may be at the behest of a superior, but nonetheless a personal responsibility for that, and a lot of people are engaged in it. I mean, we witnessed this not just in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, but also in Rwanda after the genocide, when people get together and narrate. And I think one of the sad things is that we haven't done that in this country, even though we claim, possession of a universal character like Gandhi. There is an unfortunate tendency to parochialize universalist people. The Bengalis do it with Rabindranath Tagore, and India does it with respect to Gandhi, as if, the fact that he happened to be, by a contingent circumstance, born in Gujarat and in Indian, therefore there's some special favor that's cast upon India as a whole. Not at all. We haven't had a reconciliation for partition. We need it. We haven't had a reconciliation when the Sikhs in Delhi, I was witness to this, were killed in the way they were killed. So for all of these things, we need it. And one of the things I think that's happening right now is this movement all across the country of young people and women, who would have thought that the Constitution, which is the Indian Constitution, is a huge document, running into something like 400 printed pages, 364 articles and 12 schedules. It's not something that is of general interest. In fact, booksellers, the joke is when someone asks for a copy of the Constitution, the bookseller said, "Sorry, sir, we don't stock periodicals." But today, the preamble of the Constitution is being read out by young people all over the country. So there is, hopefully, even though we have not had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the context in which we ought to have, right now there's a mood of optimism. That is, again, to be credited to the fact that this is passive resistance. The women in Shaheen Bagh are engaged in what Gandhi would have endorsed, which is simply passive resistance. Now, and in this respect, I think we also need to look at what this idea of passive resistance is a way in which Gandhi is one of those characters who kind of tell you that we are all in a way androgynous. We say we are men and women and so on, but we are mixed up. And there is, of course, in the great Nataraja, the Shiva icon of India, is a mix man and woman in the same person, Gandhi was in a way very feminine. His modes of resistance is a very feminine tactic. The British couldn't, deal with it. I mean, if you fought man to man, they could have understood. But was this guy, which Professor Murthy described, all his followers are sitting there, standing there, falling down like 9 pins and getting beaten and showing no resistance. I mean, but this is a very powerful, feminist, if you like, strategy. And I think Gandhi, we need to pick that up and all this part of our nationalist movement. There's one side of it which valorizes masculinity and, we must have spine and, be strong and, beat the other fellow up kind of thing, your enemies. And here's Gandhi with a very, very feminine strategy of passive resistance. And I think India needs to think a little bit about it, because wherever we have succeeded in a way, I mean, we've done well, it's with feminine tactics. Take cricket. The greatest batsman India produced was Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji, right? Who played for England. And he invented strokes in cricket which are very feminine. The late cut is a feminine stroke. The leg lance is a feminine stroke. You don't open your shoulders out and drive the ball with full force through covers. You give a delicate touch. So before tennis became a kind of a power sport, and tennis required a cerebral approach and placing of the ball with a delicate flick. Ramanathan Krishnan was a tennis player who played like that. Now the game's changed. Hockey. When hockey was a game again of intelligence, and you could dribble the ball along the edge of the field and get it into the goal, it's now become a power game. But when hockey was played in the way in which when India won its gold medals in hockey, the nature of the game hadn't changed. It was a game that enabled a feminine tactic to triumph. And I think we need to do that, need to rediscover the powerful strength there is in what I would say, modes of feminine resistance. And it's good to call it that, because that's one way of countering, this tendency around the world of masculine, aggressive power play. And so some of these things are important. And now I think we are living in this age where full of fake news and post-truth, that the idea of satyagraha is, the grasping the truth. And as I said, truth is not the one thing. I mean, you have different kinds of truth, and but the notion that it's important, that truth is an important value, and that we are in this age where people seem to think, it doesn't matter at all. Total relativism, what's good for me is good for me, and I don't care whether it's good for you or not, is something again where we need to rediscover and think through what is it that Gandhi was trying to get at. He was a critique of capitalism. The idea that Professor Murthy made a reference to the quote about the world having enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. But what he was really trying to say was that you mustn't want and consume when everyone cannot have and consume the same thing. And that's a very, as a moral lesson in each of our little lives, it's an important one. Think through. I mean, where people, with the crisis in energy, Formula One sports and private executive jets and all of that, twisting the law to favor multinational company executives who get themselves bonus after ruining the lives of millions of people, the way the financial system is organized, the injustice of it. All of these, which we are confronting and which we need to tackle, Gandhi in a way had anticipated it. He had anticipated that these crises will in fact happen. They are in a way embedded in the capitalist mode of production. He wasn't a socialist, he wasn't a communist, but he had placed and warned about what can happen in this system and what people need to do to cope with it. Likewise with fascist tendencies, he had anticipated that. So we now, he could see that, that public life ought to be organized around that if it's organized around this morally neutral conception of private interests, it will degenerate into ferocious competition and coercion. So he said unrestricted individualism is the law of the beast of the jungle. So it undermines social cohesion and finally creates the conditions for what the social contract is meant to preclude, a war of all against all. And therefore, I think this initiative is wonderful, most welcome, and we can say thanks to Gandhi that there is the Commonwealth, and thanks to the Commonwealth for conceptualizing an exercise where we try to think through what our future should be. Thank you.
That was a really wonderful speech, sir. Not only was it informative, but really invigorating and thought-provoking. So thank you for that, sir. We have now come to the end of the opening session. So I would now request the volunteers to kindly take the participants and the delegates for lunch. The lunch will be served at T4 Dining Hall. And I hope you enjoy your meals. And thank you very much once again, and welcome to all. So after the lunch, you all are requested to assemble here for your next sessions. Thank you so much.